I'd like to welcome everybody very much to today's Interfaith session, which is number 113. And as those who regularly participate would know, we'll begin in a moment with honouring the Indigenous people, and then some music, some readings from the scriptures of different faiths, which I suppose ultimately inspired the interfaith movement, and then usually we finish with some music, and then I'll introduce the speaker, who Reverend Dr. David Gill. I've been reading the resume, and I think we're very honoured, and it'll be a very interesting presentation tonight. So I'll ask Tracy to honour the Indigenous people.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm on the land of the Worimi people, and actually today we went for a walk, and what I will read out from a sign that the Worimi people put up near the mountain at Bulladila applies to all of the places that we live on in Australia, because it's always been Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land for millennia, and to understand what country means to them, and for us to appreciate and inherit that wisdom of caring for country. So that people talk about country in the same way they would talk about a person. They speak to country, sing to country, visit country, worry about country, feel sorry for country, and long for country. People say that country knows and hears and smells them and takes notice. And country is not just the land, but it's the water and the air and every living creature and each human. And all is meant to work together to expand life in that area and life in the whole, contribute to the life flow in the whole cosmos. So we can all benefit from that thinking. So I want to pay my respects, our respects to the elders, past, present, and for them educating the next generation to have that understanding of obligation to the divine in the country. Thank you.
تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا وهو الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا فأولئك يبدل الله سيئاتهم حسنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما ومن تاب وعمل صالحا فإنه يتوب إلى الله متابا والذين لا يشهدون الزور وإذا مروا باللغو مروا كراما والذين إذا ذكروا بآيات ربهم لم يخروا عليها صما وعميانا والذين يقولون ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما أولئك يجزون الغرفة بما صبروا ويلقون فيها تحية وسلاما خالدين فيها حسنت مستقرا ومقاما قل ما يعبأ بكم ربي لولا دعاؤكم فقد كذبتم فسوف يكون لزاما.
Oh my God, there is no one but Thee to allay the anguish of my soul. Ooh. Thou art my highest aspiration. Oh my God, oh my God, ooh, ooh. My heart is wedded to none save Thee, and such as Thou dost love, I solemnly declare my life and death are both for Thee. Ooh, they are for You. Ooh. My heart is grace and none save thee, and such as thou dost love, I solemnly declare my life and death are both for thee. Ooh, they are for you. They are for you. For you. Oh my God, there is no one but thee to allay the anguish of my soul. Ooh. Thou art my highest aspiration. Oh my God, oh my God, ooh,
In thy esteem letter, you had inquired which of the prophets of God should be regarded as superior to others. Know thou assuredly that the essence of all the prophets of God is one and the same. Their unity is absolute. God, the Creator, says, "There is no distinction whatsoever among the bearers of my message. They all have but one purpose. The secret is the same secret, to prefer one in honor to another, to exalt certain ones above the rest, is in no wise to be permitted. Every true prophet has regarded his message as fundamentally the same as the revelations of every other prophet gone before him. If any man, therefore, should fail to comprehend this truth, and should consequently indulge in vain and unseemly language, no one whose sight is keen and whose understanding is enlightened could ever allow such idle talk to cause him to waver in his belief. Baha'i Scriptures.
The measure of the revelation of the prophets of God in this world, however, must differ. Each and every one of them have been the bearer of a distinct message and hath been commissioned to reveal himself through specific acts. It is for this reason that they appear to vary in their greatness. Their revelation may be likened unto the light of the moon that sheddeth its radiance upon the earth. Though every time it appeareth, it revealeth a fresh measure of its brightness. Yet its inherent splendour can never diminish, nor can its light suffer extinction. The fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race. The religion of God is for love and unity. Make it not the cause of enmity or dissension. Religion is verily the chief instrument for the establishment of order in the world and of tranquility amongst its peoples. Religion, moreover, is not a series of beliefs, a set of customs. Religion is the teachings of the Lord God, teachings which constitute the very life of humankind, which urge high thoughts upon the mind, refine the character, and lay the groundwork for man's everlasting honour. Baha'i Scriptures.
We gave Moses the book and followed him up with a succession of messengers. We gave Jesus, the son of Mary, clear signs and strengthened him with the Holy Spirit. Is it that whenever there comes to you a messenger with what you yourselves desire not, you are puffed up with pride? Some ye called impostors, and others ye slay. The messenger believeth in what had been revealed to him from his Lord, as do the men of faith. Each one of them believeth in Allah, his angels, his books, and his messengers. We make no distinction, they say, between one and another of his messengers. And they say, we hear and we obey. We seek thy forgiveness, our Lord, and to thee is the end of all journeys. The Quran.
Long-suffering patience is the supreme ascetic practice. Nirvana is supreme, say the Buddhas. He is certainly not an ascetic who hurts others, and nor is he a man of religion who causes suffering to others. The bhikkhu who lives full of goodwill with faith in the religion of the Buddha, he will reach the place of peace, the satisfaction of stilling the functions of the mind. Buddhist scriptures. Whenever there is a decline in righteousness, O Bharat, and the rise of irreligion, it is then that I send forth my spirit. For the salvation of the good, the destruction of the evildoers, and for firmly establishing righteousness, I manifest myself from age to age. Hindu scriptures.
If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. I go away and come again unto you. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is expedient for you that I go away. For if I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. But when the Comforter is come, whom I will send unto you from the Father, even the Spirit of truth, which proceedeth from the Father, he shall testify of me. He shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever he shall hear, that shall he speak. The Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things. Christian scriptures.
The purpose of the one true God, exalted be his glory, in revealing himself unto men, is to lay bare those gems that lie hidden within the mine of their true and inmost selves, that the that the diverse communions of the earth and the manifold systems of religious belief should never be allowed to foster the feelings of animosity among men is in this day of the essence of the faith of God and his religion. These principles and laws, these firmly established and mighty systems, have proceeded from one source and are the rays of one light. That they differ one from another is to be attributed to the varying requirements of the ages in which they were promulgated. The prophets of God should be regarded as physicians whose task is to foster the well-being of the world and its peoples, that through the spirit of oneness, they may heal the sickness of a divided humanity. Little wonder then, if the treatment prescribed by the physician in his day should not be found to be identical with that which he prescribed before. How could it be otherwise when the ills affecting the sufferer necessitate at every stage of his sickness a special remedy? From the Baha'i scriptures.
The differences among the religions of the world are due to the varying types of minds. So long as the powers of the mind are various, it is certain that men's judgments and opinions will differ one from another. If, however, one single universal perceptive power be introduced, a power encompassing all the rest, those differing opinions will merge, and a spiritual harmony and oneness will become apparent. For example, when the Christ was made manifest, the minds of the various contemporary peoples, their views, their emotional attitudes, whether they were Romans, Greeks, Syrians, Israelites, or others, were at variance with one another. But once his universal power was brought to bear, it gradually succeeded after the lapse of 300 years in gathering together all those divergent minds under the protection and within the governance of one central point, all sharing the same spiritual emotions in their hearts. Baha'i scripture.
Muhammad never fought against the Christians. On the contrary, he treated them with consideration and accorded them complete freedom. In Najran, there lived a community of Christians, and they were under his care and protection. Muhammad said, "Should anyone infringe upon their rights, I myself will be his enemy and will charge him before God." In the edicts he promulgated, it is clearly stated that the lives, property, and honor of Jews and Christians are under the protection of God, that a Muslim husband may not prevent his Christian wife from going to church, nor oblige her to wear a veil, that if she died, he must entrust her remains to the care of a priest, and that if the Christians desire to build a church, the Muslims must support them. Furthermore, in time of war between Islam and her enemies, the Christians were to be exempt from fighting unless they desired of their own accord to join and assist the Muslims in battle in view of the protection they enjoyed. In compensation for this exemption, they were to pay each year a small amount. In short, there are 7 lengthy edicts on these subjects, copies of some of which are to this day extant in Jerusalem. This is the very truth and not merely my own assertion. The edict of the second caliph is still in the custody of the Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, and the matter is beyond doubt. Nevertheless, after a time, rancor and envy arose between Muslims and Christians as transgressions were committed by both sides. Beyond this truth, whatever Muslims, Christians, or others may say is pure fabrication and proceeds from fanaticism, ignorance, or intense hostility. Abdul Baha from Baha'i Scriptures.
Unite and bind together the hearts. Unite and bind together the hearts. Join in the chord all the souls. Join in the chord all the souls. Oh Lord, make these faces radiant through the light of thy oneness. Unite and bind together the hearts. Unite and bind together the hearts. Join in the chord all the souls. Join in the chord all the souls. Oh Lord, make these faces radiant through the light of thy oneness. Unite and bind together the hearts. Unite and bind together the hearts. Join the chord all the souls. Join in the chord all the souls. Oh Lord, make these faces radiant through the light of thy oneness. Unite and bind together the hearts. Unite and bind together the hearts. Join the chord all the souls. Join in the chord all the souls. Oh Lord, make these faces radiant through the light of thy
Thank you, Terry, for choosing the readings, and thank you everyone for reading so clearly with meaning. So it's my very great pleasure and honour to welcome tonight Reverend Dr. David Gill, and who is a member of the Order of Australia. He was ordained in 1965. David served on the staff of the Australian Student Christian Movement, studied in the United States and Switzerland, and worked for 12 years with the World Council of Churches in Geneva. He was General Secretary of the National Assembly of the Uniting Church in Australia and the National Council of Churches in Australia, before taking on what he says was the best job of the lot, pastor of Kowloon Union Church, Hong Kong. Along the way, he has visited over 60 countries, sat through more meetings than he cares to remember, been closely involved with the Christian Conference of Asia, served on the joint working group between the World Council of Churches and the Roman Catholic Church, and helped promote relations between Christians and people of other faiths. And the topic of the course, of course, which is most intriguing, religion's struggle, the love of power versus the power of love. So over to you, David, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. Modern Australia came into being on the 1st of January 1901. It is sobering to remember that this nation's birth was accompanied by a religious brawl. The ceremony was to take place in Sydney's Centennial Park, where the new nation was to be proclaimed and the first Governor-General sworn in. Through the city, there would be a procession of the great and the good from the various Australian colonies about to become states. And that procession was the problem. For at the last minute, an unholy row erupted between the Anglican Archbishop of Sydney and his Roman Catholic counterpart over who should have precedence in the procession. After much huffing and puffing, the Anglican Archbishop won. Cardinal Moran withdrew in protest, and not to be outdone, the Wesleyan, Presbyterian, and Methodist leaders decided to boycott things as well. All in all, the 1st of January 1901 was not one of the ecumenical movement's better days. We shake our heads, sadly, at this, or perhaps we laugh. But we had better not laugh too loud or for too long. Why? Because a religious hankering after prestige, status, power is not something that started or stopped on the 1st of January 1901. Nor is that hankering peculiar to Australia, nor, I suspect, though this is for others to say, not me, nor, I suspect, is it a problem peculiar to those of us who are Christians. It's hardly surprising, I guess. The craving for power and prestige is very human. And we are, all of us, very human, sometimes appallingly human, even when we are wearing the trappings of religion. It happens in different ways, of course. We see the problem For example, when religious leaders cuddle up too closely with political power and end up distorting the very faith they're supposed to be representing. An example, a couple of years ago, one of my Facebook friends put up a scathing cartoon entitled "The Church Betrays Jesus." The cartoon showed two figures caught in bed together. One, wearing a cross, was labeled church, and the other, from his hairdo, could only have been the then President of the United States, Donald Trump. Standing in the doorway was a shocked-looking Jesus. The church betrays Jesus? Yes, it was a fair comment, I think, given the way white evangelical Christians had helped elect Donald Trump and continued to give him legitimacy. It was a fair comment. Of course, the problem may be religious bodies trying to maintain or even strengthen their own power. For example, since 2017, Australia has been embroiled in ongoing controversy about whether we need new legislation dealing with religious freedom. In part, I think that's a legitimate desire for clarity about how our different freedoms in this country intersect. But at times, it looks very much like an attempt by religious groups to entrench their own power and privilege. And that picture of religious groups struggling for power does not endear us at all to the Australian community, and it doesn't do much either for the faiths we seek to profess. For what must drive any religion worthy of the name is not status, but service. The Pope has a wonderful title that appears under his name in some of the important documents that he issues. The title is Servus Servorum Dei. And in case your Latin is a bit rusty, that means servant of the servants of God. Servant of the servants of God. It's a title that goes back to the 6th century. Now, of course, popes haven't always lived up to that title, any more than those of us who are stuck with the bizarre tag of reverend have lived up to our title either. But it's a good label, not only for popes. It should be written into the job descriptions, carved into the desks of all involved in religious leadership. It's a reminder that those who lead should do so not through domination, but through service. Their authority is to be ministerial, not magisterial. They should be driven not by the love of power, but by the power of love. The problem is not just religious leaders. We all need to be on guard. Most of the time, this yearning for power is really masking the fact that people yearn for religious security. Like when I comfortably imagine that my particular religious community has the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm hankering for security when I fall into that trap. Or when I retreat behind the theological barbed wire with which my religious community sometimes fences itself around. Of course, we say we are safeguarding truths we have received, but we're also protecting who we like to think we are. It's a security thing. When I fail to recognize the holy in unlikely people, when I do not hear the truth because it's in unfamiliar texts, when I refuse to cross boundaries or think fresh thoughts or put aside old antagonisms and open my heart and mind to new relationships. It's all the hankering for religious security, something to keep me safe with the image of myself that I have. Breaking out of that kind of religious security built upon these things can take effort. It can be risky, but of course it's always rather exhilarating. Let me give a personal example. Some years ago, Australia and Indonesia were indulging in one of their regular shouting matches. This one was over East Timor. Relations between the churches in the two countries were starting to fray also. With some long service leave due, I decided to take myself up to Java and learn some Bahasa Indonesia. The locals became my long-suffering targets as I experimented with their language. And one day, one of my victims, a waiter in a local restaurant, discovered I was a pendeta, a pastor. And eventually, a few days later, obviously troubled, he came to me asking for my advice. Pak Pendeta, he said, Pastor, I have done a bad thing. He spelled out what was worrying him. I am Muslim, he said. Holy Quran says that Allah is holy, and I fear that Allah will punish me. I am so scared. Yes, I agreed. Holy Quran does say Allah is holy. But Holy Quran also says Allah is merciful, and that mercy is for you. He pondered that for a while and then looked relieved. Oh yeah, he said with a huge smile, Allah is merciful. Then he added something I've often thought about. Terima kasih, pendeta saya, he said. Thank you, my pastor. Thank you, my pastor. We had both crossed religious boundary lines. He, in adopting me as a spiritual guide, me, when I moved into his framework of meaning to say something I would have said to anyone under the circumstances, and then that extraordinary and heartwarming statement right at the end. Thank you, my pastor. I began tonight with that shameful clash between Australia's churches. Let me end with another much happier ecumenical example. In the late 1990s, Australia's community relationships were feeling the strain. One nation, as usual, was telling us to hate someone, I think it was Asians then, who were in the firing line. Indigenous land rights had everyone shouting at one another, and feelings were running high. It was not a good time for the country. I happened to be working with the National Council of Churches then. At a meeting of our governing body, these and other issues were discussed. Some good resolutions emerged. Some good policy initiatives were adopted. But the most memorable moment came right at the end during our closing worship. With no prior warning, two participants, one Aboriginal, the other Torres Strait Islander, came forward. Then two heads of churches, Cardinal Ted Clancy, then chair of the Australian Bishops' Conference, and Archbishop Keith Rayner, then primate of the Anglican Church, came forward. They knelt. The two heads of churches knelt before the two Indigenous people, and they washed their feet. Then roles were switched around. The two Indigenous Christians washed the feet of the two church leaders. Not a word was said, but that moment spoke powerfully, not about, spoke powerfully, but not about power, not about prestige or privilege. It spoke about the exact opposite. It pointed to a different set of values, a different kind of religious life, striving for a different kind of nation in a different kind of world. It pointed not to the love of power, but to the power of love. It reminded us all that is the only greatness that really matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That's very a topic which I think we all can relate to and appreciate. Being an interfaith group, it's not easy to talk to other people when you're in a kind of a bubble of security, and maybe that was a key insight I got from the talk, is even though it seems to be a search for power underlying it, there's some search for security there. So maybe I can start with a question, and anybody else, please use the put your hand up using the reactions button, and that will put people in a sequence for asking questions. I'm just wondering how can anybody feel secure when they're in a conversation with someone with a belief that they think is wrong or dangerous or something like that?
Sorry, can you say I missed out on the last bit of that, Colin. How can anyone feel secure when what?
Yeah. How can we make ourselves feel secure so that dialogue can happen when dialogue is often between people? Well, a good dialogue, we respect each other, but what passes for dialogue these days is quite often people just asserting, using verses as kind of a hammer to defeat the other person. So how can we, what's the best way to feel secure and have better dialogue?
Yeah, I presume this is a general discussion, not just asking me to respond. But
no, well, yes, except that we want to hear
Well-
you, and people have to ask questions.
Well, let me say, I think with someone using verses as a hammer, dialogue is impossible. It's a no-win game. I mean, it's the basis for any worthwhile dialogue must be surely, first of all, the recognition that we share so much in common: our humanity, our yearning for grace, our search for meaning, our need of forgiveness, our reaching after hope. I mean, we're all in the same human boat, and that must be recognized as the very starting point. And secondly, a recognition of the limitations to all our religious traditions. We're dealing with human creations that, of course, people want to take, and rightly want to take seriously, but again and again, people confuse the human creativity that's gone into our religious traditions with the actual reality. The reality of God, or the reality that is ultimate, whatever name we give it, is not the same thing as the words that are put together by your religious tradition or mine or any other. And if that recognition doesn't exist, it's very difficult to dialogue. But once it does exist, especially if friendship and trust have been established along the way, wonders can happen.
Thank you for that insight. Yeah, friendship and trust is a prerequisite. That makes sense, because I have a friend who is scared even to join an interfaith meeting in case it's the devil or something like that. Yeah, thank you. Siva, you're next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, David, for this very powerful talk. Probably one of the powerful talks that I have listened in this forum. And they had a very strong message for the whole humanity. My question, you mentioned about where the religious freedom, you cited the example that there was a change in the law, or they were proposing to change the law for the religious freedom. And you said that sometimes these freedoms actually infringe on other freedoms. Can you give some example and elaborate, and what should actually the religious freedom should be?
Well, I honestly do not have a formula for the way any legislation should go. It seems to me to be extraordinarily difficult and very complex. The problem is that religious freedom sometimes has institutions wanting to cut across other freedoms. And especially we hear about this from sexual minorities in Australia. Okay, you can't discriminate against people on the basis of their sexuality, but what happens if a church says anything other than heterosexuality is not acceptable on the staff of our schools? How do you reconcile? How do you deal with that clash of freedoms? And that's what governments are paid for, to sort that one out. But it's extraordinarily difficult, and I'm very glad I'm not a lawyer who has to draft legislation. That's the problem. I cannot help but feel, however, that this may be the sort of thing that's best dealt with, not with the heavy hammer of legislation, but with a genuine willingness to extend flexibility and toleration between people. We're not very good at that. We keep talking as though every human problem can be solved with law. There are some problems that you cannot solve by hitting people over the head with law. And perhaps this is one of them.
Thank you. You're muted, Seba. Was there a supplementary question?
So do you think, in the example that you gave, that different religions coming together and make a joint statement or declaration on certain issues will be helpful, or it is more detrimental?
Oh, I think it can be helpful when they genuinely have worked through the issues and come to a common mind. On this issue of religious freedom legislation, there is no common mind, at least as far as I can see. The various, even within the Christian community, there is sharp division about what should happen. And I suspect that would be true for a number of other communities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Young, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, David. I have very simple questions. I heard you mention some names of cardinals, the cardinals. I just want you to help me to understand if it's a very good idea that the interfaith people have some sort of separate court system to manage the truth. Just like, in the last few months or something, Cardinal George Pell was accused of doing things like that, and that should not be passed on to the government court system, but should be looked inside the interfaith group. Obviously, got to go through the local first, and then go to the Roman Catholic area, and with people look into it, democracy, and go to Vatican. But the interfaith group, as we interfaith, we have so many leaders with brilliant minds. I wonder if we should have a separate, different jurisdiction to look into a matter like that, because we actually don't need to go to high court to pass all the paper to high court. So later on, and just change the verdict, whatever, reduce a sentence or whatever. You think that's a good idea? That's very my simple question.
I think it depends on what the issue is that has to be dealt with. If I do not pay my taxes, for example, that's not a religious issue. That's not something that should be dealt with by my church or by an interfaith body, because I am breaking the law of the land. So it's fair enough that I should be dragged into court and put in jail if I do not pay my taxes. It is a law of the nation that's involved, not a law of the church. If the issue, however, is whether I have departed from the Christian faith, and I'm a minister of the church, then that is a problem for the church to resolve. It's not a matter for the government of Australia to worry about. It's something for the uniting church to deal with. And I don't think that could be dealt with very well by an interfaith body. It really has to be dealt with by the religious community of which I am part. So in the case of George Pell, there were actually several issues running around his very interesting life. Some of them had to do with whether in one way or another he had broken the laws of the land. And other issues, of course, had to do with whether he was faithfully representing the teachings of the Catholic Church. And I think the first lot rightly landed in the courts of Australia. The second lot rightly landed in the lap of the Vatican. It seems to me that's how it has to happen. And I don't think an interfaith court of any kind would have helped there.
Yeah, but I mean, leave the matter is easy, black and white. If they know somebody, does somebody else is innocent or was innocent, will the interfaith court system be able to stand up and say that is wrong when people accuse that person? Because they have to say what is the religious security, protect themselves, protect the church, whatsoever. But if they know somebody is innocent, will they be able to stand up and talk and argue for that person? Because you say nothing but the truth. That is the sentence, the statement used in a court system. Nothing but the truth. You have to tell the truth because they hand a Bible to make an oath. So therefore, the religious leaders should be leading the proceedings to protect that person, just like in the old day, when they try to decide whether they free Barbara from the jail, the Roman people, they say free Barbara, or free somebody else. I mean, that's a different matter, but, I'm talking about the innocent people that get accused of something they did not do.
Well, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I know. That is just something that's up to my mind. But I mean, talk about power. The power according to whatever I listen to the lecturer, power actually endow on people from God. God gives the leaders some characters that make them to be leaders, just like Moses. Moses take power because he tried to save his people. He tried to get the slavery out of bondage, slavery bondage. So he was empowered by God, not because he loved power, but he got pushed into it because he loved people. So that is just a proof that he's a man of faith. But nowadays, with power, we have to have money go with power and to become real power. Otherwise, if no money, they said, no, you have no real power. But you can't do anything.
Thank you, Young. David, did you want to comment on that before I move to Ali?
Maybe can I comment?
Ali, I'm going to let's see if a comment before you.
Okay. I think the first thing that Jung said that about interfaith jurisdiction, that is a long way to go. As David mentioned that, the Australian nation was founded the day there was a brawl between these the same Christianity within the denominations of Christianity. Now we have a long way to go to come to agreement with the different religions. So if there is a time when all the religions agree that we are one, then probably a court like that can eventuate. Until then, I don't think that is a practical thing to imagine. Yes, that's what I wanted to comment. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Siva. And Ali.
Yeah. Thank you, David, for very enlightening talk. Really, I enjoyed your talk. That was good, especially the history of the federation and the disagreement between the two church leaders on the first day of celebration of becoming a nation. And then at the end, towards the power of love, the two church leaders washing the feet of the two indigenous people. Really, that was very amazing story to be shared here. But my question is really to the responsibility of the leaders of religion, no matter what background we are, whether we are Christian, Muslim, or whatever we are. So through the history, we have found that the religious leaders have been really causing a lot of conflict between various denominations, various faiths. And so my question is that how we can bring it to the attention of the leaders, religious leaders, that their aim is to bring people together, no matter what background you are. Like the story you told us about your time in Java, and this Muslim came to you, talked about the punishment and all this thing, and he showed him even in Islam, God is merciful. So it's not only in other religion, in whatever background they are, still God is merciful to what we can. So my question is that how we can the religious leaders to be convinced that their job is to bring people together, not to divide them, not to bring conflicts between them. So, yes, thanks, David.
Thanks, Ali. Let me say, I am an optimist, an incurable optimist about this, because I think there's been enormous progress in the last few decades. I've seen it among the Christian churches. I mean, they are cooperating right, left, and center now. I was General Secretary of the National Council of Churches when the Roman Catholic Church became a member of our national ecumenical body. Now, 50 years ago, that would have been unimaginable. And Protestants and Catholics were still throwing stones at each other. The distrust was very strong between the churches, but now they meet as friends. Something has changed, and that's only within Christians in fairly recent decades. And I think something similar has been happening on the interfaith front. I'll give you another personal example.
Sure.
Just before 9/11, the tragedy of the Twin Towers in New York.
Yes.
Before that happened, I was still General Secretary of the National Council of Churches. We had started a dialogue between the National Council of Churches and the Australian Federation of Islamic Councils. Oh, and the Jewish community had gotten involved too. So it was a three-way conversation. The leaders had come to know each other. We'd become friends. And then this disaster happened. I got a phone call in my office from the Prime Minister's office saying the Prime Minister wanted to have a service of commemoration of what had happened in Canberra. And he wanted to involve a Muslim in the service. Who should he contact? So I said, I suggest This is the phone number of the Australian Federation of Islamic Councils. Thank you very much. Then I immediately phoned AFIC and I said, you're about to get a phone call from Canberra. This is just to warn you. A few minutes later, my Muslim counterpart called me back and said, David, I'm going crazy here. The phone never stops ringing. The media, the press is outside the door. Now the Prime Minister wants me to approve a prayer. And I don't have time to look at it. Would you mind, if I fax it through to you, would you mind looking at the prayer and letting me know if it's the kind of prayer that a Muslim can say? So I did. And I called him back and I said, yeah, I've checked the prayer and it'll be okay for a Muslim to say that. Then I thought to myself, what has happened here? I've suddenly become the unofficial liturgical consultant to the Australian Federation of Islamic Councils. I mean, that's the sort of thing that happens when people become friends and trust each other. And that's happening right across the board. It's not only what's happening at heads of churches or heads of religions level. I see it when local women's groups decide that they want to get to know each other, and young people's groups decide they want to visit the mosque and find out what's happening there. So I see no reason to imagine that's about to stop. And we're so lucky in Australia because we don't have to travel overseas to meet all these interesting people. They're here. They're part of this community. The world has come to Australia, thank heavens. So I think this will continue.
Thank you, David. That's very
Thank you.
positive perspective. I like that. Yeah, Reverend John, please.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Reverend David, for the inspiring message that you gave. You took us on a journey, actually. I'm going to sort of say a few things from my experience, responding to your speech today. One is that I was a human rights advocate in Sri Lanka, particularly in the East, for 6 years. And I was the only one voice, the voice for Tamils in Trincomalee at that time. And one and only target at that time, would have been the first clergy martyr at that time. And I challenged the 4 heads of forces and brought them to the church and got the community, a few of them, to talk. And then it went on like that. And then I spoke against the violence unleashed on the minority Tamils, innocent Tamils. Even children were burnt to death. And then what happened? I went from that power of love that I had, it's a gift of God. Love is a gift of God to humanity. And I was fully involved with that. And I didn't care about myself. It was almost a self-forgetting situation. And I was very vulnerable. I could have been killed in my sleep. And I will take you to the next stage, that I came to Australia and worked for 35 years in the Uniting Church. And I was chair of the Central West Presbytery, and I was able to bring the people together, the whole lot together, divided groups. And when I came to Sydney in 1996, the first month itself, I was called into the detention center, and still now I'm part of that visitation program and advocacy. Last year, I got 5 fellows out of detention, and I work with immigration as well. But what I have seen working with the asylum seekers and refugees, you humble yourself to such an extent. You do. I usually talk to them as we rather than you, because one of the things I wrote was, I'm a refugee, and I'm reading Good Samaritan with the refugees, because I felt so vulnerable working with them. And the message that I got over and over again was, it is power of love, all right, but at the same time, it is the powerlessness of the love that drove me to take the risk that I took for the last 27 years. Still, I'm working. I work with the National Christian Council of Australia, the Australian Churches Refugee Task Force, for the last 10 years. I'm part of, so about 8 or 9 people. We work with Elizabeth. So that is something that actually sort of the message that I have from my experience, which resonates with all what you have said. One other thing was that I was part of the Christian spirituality group of Sydney Synod of New South Wales and ACT. And I worked with Dr. Ross Kingham. And so this was last 20 years. About 10 years ago, I suggested, why not have an interreligious spirituality retreat? Because we were having spirituality retreat every year in Kingham, somewhere there in the Central Coast. And it was an eye-opener for everyone. Paul Vayamara was, having that the ceremony of the smoke ceremony, and Islamic people, the different religious people came together, and we were just bonded together because of spirituality and not religion. We spoke about the spiritual qualities that each and every community was talking about. So each had a 3 minutes or 4 minutes talk, and you could see into the eyes of the other and say whatever you say. So that was a real eye opener to all of us. When I organized it, I organized it with Pearl Vayamara. I didn't envisage that end, which opened the eyes and the hearts of all of us. So similarly, I've done weddings for Islamic Christian weddings, Hindu Christian wedding, and that was last week. The previous week, I had a Buddhist Christian wedding, and the topic was love. And that brought people together. I got a lot of feedback from the Hindus and the Buddhists saying that they never went for a wedding where they feel comfortable. So this is my example, sir. And then in 2019 April, the Easter bombing happened in Sri Lanka. So another minister and myself, over the phone the same night, we were agonizing of what happened. And I come from Batticaloa in Sri Lanka, and one of my churches also got bombed. 200 people died altogether. So the next day, I, with the help of a couple of people, organized a 500 people vigil in Blacktown Uniting Church, where the multicultural minister came along when he heard about it. And it was on the radio, whatever. But the best thing was there were 60 Muslims who were agonizing over that, because Muslims were targeted in Sri Lanka and all over the world over that bombing. So out of that, 2 of them came and gave talk. One was a doctor. Both of them, I gave hugs. I conducted the 2-hour vigil and gave hugs to the 2 of them. And there was pin drop silence. And thereby, without saying anything, we exonerated, or you can't say exonerated because they are not guilty. It was not a Muslim attack on Christians from in the first place. So that taught me more to be more humble, at the same time to be more vulnerable. And you can ask Siva, a couple of them that know me, I'm so vulnerable. Like, and my younger son says, "Dad, you are a public figure. Expect to get stone thrown at you," and I still keep going. And yeah, that's my experience and powerlessness of the love.
Thank you, John. Thank you. That was an important contribution, I think.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me say proudly, John is a pastor in my own church, the Uniting Church in Australia.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks. I'm proud to have you in our church. Well, I've read about you. I've read from you, but your writings are but I can't remember when I met you last. And yes, the name everyone knows. And thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I also appreciate John because he was a pastor in Parks, where I grew up and where I still visit frequently. And there are Uniting Church members there who still remember John and looking forward to seeing him again. Now, is anyone who hasn't asked a question who would like to? Yes, Pina, and then Val. You're muted there, Pina.
You have to unmute. Pina, unmute.
I appreciate how our speaker spoke so mildly, so kindly, like a loving father. It's like I feel like I'm drinking milk and nourishing me spiritually and physically. Thank you so much. And to talk about love, and of course, to me, my understanding is the greatest love is the love of God, because it is the love that we are created. And I remember what Baha'u'llah said, that I love thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. So let us always be reminded that we are existing because of the love of God. And sometimes when we feel so lonely and it seems that nobody seems to love us, we just remember that God loves us. And the love of God is just like the sunshine. Without it, we will die. See? So if the love of God is there and we are hiding underground, we cannot receive that light. Wherefore, even though we are assured of the love of God, he said that love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. Even though it is assured, there is also a covenant that we must love back, so that we would receive that bounty or blessing of life, spiritual life. You see, it's like a blessing is coming and it's for you to reach out, open your arms, open your heart, open your hand to receive it. But if you keep your hand in your pocket, you cannot receive it. It is something like that. And I like this power of love and not the love of power. It should be the opposite. We should do the opposite. And exactly what Abdul Baha said, that if someone hates you, show love. If somebody puts you down, elevate their station. If they poison your life, sweeten their souls. We do the opposite. It is so amazing. This learning is something that we need to not only remember, but to put into practice so that it shapes our lives. It becomes a way of life, this love. And when everybody loves this way, and if my love for God, that intensity of the love of God, should I the same way love humanity? And if everyone do that, what will happen to this world? As Jesus Christ said, the kingdom of God will be on earth as it is in heaven. It is not just a prayer. It is a prophecy that it will come, that we have been praying for thousands of years, and it should come. And of course, it doesn't come until we put into practice that love for all humanity. So we work for a cause, not for applause. We should, our absence should be felt, not our presence. The humbleness that I've been hearing from these friends, the humility, you see, we have to be humble ourselves, because if we humble ourselves, he will visit us in our hearts. because it is the humbleness that make our heart open the door of the presence of God himself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pina. And Val, please.
Thank you. I just want to apologise, but I had other commitments and didn't hear the speech, David. But I knew it would be very powerful, and so far from what I heard, it was powerful. Now, I do have a question, but I just want to elaborate to make sure you understand the question. I'm very concerned about the war that's going on in Russia and Ukraine at the moment, and religion is kind of a part of it. And from my perspective, in the rehabilitation centre, it was said that the disease of addiction or whatever diseases are, they are emotional, physical, psychological, and spiritual. And if one was to get the spiritual side into a healthy balance, then the others will fall into a healthy balance as a result of that. Now, my question is, you've got the Russian Orthodox Church, which is basically, well, according to a lot of opinions, right out of line with the scripture and so forth, and motivating the country in the wrong direction. Now, do we have a body in the world that can also sanction that type of activity, like the governments have joined together and they're sanctioning the Russian government, so to speak? Do we have that from a spiritual perspective? That's my question.
Right. Yes. The World Council of Churches had its assembly back in, I think, September last year, and this was a key issue there. What should there be some kind of sanction against the membership of the Russian Orthodox Church? The decision, I think, rightly, was to say we should not expel the Russian Orthodox Church. We need to talk and pray and think with the Russian Orthodox Church. So cutting communication is not the way to go. I think that was wise. And since, well, before and since that decision, there's been a lot of toing and froing and conversation. And I don't know who's been involved in that. I would like to think that eventually the Ukrainian Christian leaders will be involved with that. But I'm not close enough to it to know. Let me say just one other thing. Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Moscow Patriarchate of the Russian Orthodox Church, has been criticized heavily. That's right. And maybe the criticisms are absolutely right, that he's too close to his government, that he's tangled up the church position with the position taken by Putin. But those of us outside that situation need to remember that the history of religion, not just the Christian churches, but the history of religion generally, is the history of people allowing their religions to get too tangled up with the national flag. Patriotism and faith again and again get mixed up together. And yes, by all means, let's criticize the leadership of the Russian Orthodox Church, but let's do so with a note of penitence about our own failures, the failures in our own countries in years past.
Yes, I follow what you're saying, and I'm doing research on tithing from different religious perspectives, And when going to China, I did a business card, and I said on the business card that the secret to healthy relationships, the 3 secrets, I beg your pardon, to healthy relationships is communication, communication, and communication. And from what you are saying now, like there's been a conference or whatever in September, and here we are in February, hoping that Ukrainians will join the conversation. It's kind of disappointing. I was just wondering if there's any body that can sort of address that issue and speed the process up while people are dying on a daily basis, and the deaths are increasing on a daily basis, and it will be. There is also the threat of nuclear war. I think a lot of people underestimate what's happening over there at the moment, David.
Yeah, I think we can all share the anguish you express. I don't know of any way of speeding it up. It's in the hands of the diplomats, it's in the hands of the politicians, and ultimately it's in the hands of God. And somehow we have to live with our inability to speed things up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Val and David. We have about 15 minutes, so there's time for people who haven't asked a question yet, or you can make a comment.
And Tracy?
Yeah, just with the Russia and Ukraine, isn't it part of it as people of faith who actually pray for everybody? When there is a conflict, pray that some awareness of the consequences of our actions. I mean, that, Ukraine is feeling they're fighting for their survival. And, but we have to pray that love will change the sort of dialogue and the way people are viewed, how Russians are viewing Ukrainians at the moment, and how Ukrainians can bear the attack happening to them, defending their view of how they want to live their life without resorting to hate. That we're sowing hate to be going down into the future, and that somehow people of faith, that our responsibility is to be praying for everyone on both sides of the conflict, and praying for somehow, God's spirit to be touching people. I mean, Saul was killing a lot of Christians before he became Paul. Miracles can happen. Things can change. But, where people of faith, we have to ask that we can be helped to keep a view of love. But also then we have to use our words, our mouths, to speak words of love and to pray prayers of love and peace. But it's not easy. We have to stay away from the political view, and that, all life has come from God. But, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you're right, except that last bit about staying away from the political view. I agree. We should not allow our prayers to be politically determined, or we should not pray as though one group of people matter and another group doesn't matter at all. They're all children of God. But the conflict that's going on at the moment is not simply between Ukraine and Russia. There are other players in the field. The Western European nations that are supporting Ukraine, the United States supporting Ukraine. We need, and because we tend to hear only what's happening in Ukraine to the Ukrainians. We don't hear much from the Russian side of all this. I guess our reporters are in Ukraine, not in Russia, but it's not often you hear a Russian angle on what's happening. And there are deeper, complex political issues that go back. I mean, we mentioned the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. He's still wrestling with issues that go back centuries, issues about whether Ukraine is part of Mother Russia, should be part of Mother Russia, is eternally part of Mother Russia. And unless all of that somehow gets factored into our thinking, we're not really dealing with the situation. So yes, our prayers need to be non-political. Our thinking needs to be as wise as we can make it, because I think it's not only a matter of leaning on Moscow to stop what's happening now, it's a matter of leaning on other countries too, to say, look, isn't it about time you showed greater willingness to negotiate diplomatically?
I have a completely different topic to ask you about. We've got the big referendum happening this year, and there's some on the no side. I'm sort of having conversations with people about the Uluru Statement and the Voice to Parliament. And, to sort of I'm sort of trying to encourage prayers for faith people that we can, buffer some of these conversations that are happening, because you encounter, some really entrenched viewpoints. Anyway, do you have any comments about this year of the Great Australian Reckoning?
Well, like many, and like you, I hope very much that we get the voice. I hope the proposal wins support first in Parliament and then in the popular vote, constitutional vote. I'm nervous, however, because Australia's record on dealing with constitutional amendments is not very encouraging. We tend to be scared about constitutional change, and we've set the bar very high for getting a positive vote. So I'm not at all confident it'll go through, but I hope very much it will. It'll be a tragedy if it is voted down, I think.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Well had his hand up, and then he has gone down.
No, I just, I welcome what's happening in Australia in regards to the topic just raised there, because it's part of making amends. But again, sort of the answer that I heard here is kind of reminds me of faith without works is, what does it say in the Bible?
Is dead.
Is dead, yes. And this is kind of reminds me, because I just don't feel that the spiritual religions are doing enough. And this is, I guess, this is why I'm sort of anxious in regards to this. Praying. I'm doing research at the moment about praying, and different religions getting together and pray for a cause, and I'm sure that has a good influence on the situations. But again, apart from praying, there's also action needed, and this is kind of, I just feel disappointed. There's not enough getting done. Sorry to harp on the subject, but it's very close to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Val. Young, can you keep it very short, because I want to ask a question next.
Thank you so much, David and Colin and Siva. According to the textbook and all the recommended reading and study about Russian nation, the state always take control over every matter in communist state or socialist state. The government, the state would like to have a bit of control over whatever decision making from the people. So according to the study at the universities, also all the books for 100 years have been written, explained by the Russian professors. So if you go back to the textbook, then you won't be disappointed, because that's an indoctrination of communists and socialists involved. That's why they want to take part of control, and other nations will have to fall under like domino effect. So that's one thing. And therefore, I hope one day when our interfaith collaboration getting stronger, then people will be able to form a committee similar to the court system, but not so close. I mean, state want to take control anyway, so it can't move away from the state control. But people want voice, and they want more than voices. They want more than advices. They want funding, they want money. Simple as that. So everything gotta be taken into management. So that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. David, I'm just thinking, it's very hard to, I guess, for religions and churches to be united on an issue, any particular issue, whether it's Ukraine or anything else, or it's very hard to do anything unless there's unity. And I heard this analogy which kind of illustrates earthly power with divine power or love, and that is that 100 people can build a building, and one person can destroy it. But where there's love, like with Jesus, one person can build a building which 100 people can't destroy, which of course was Christianity, and maybe love has something to do with that.
Yeah. I know it's difficult to engage many different people on a lot of issues that we feel strongly about, but it seems to me we should be looking to build a common mind around the things that matter most, like, for example, the evil of racism. Now that is something that surely all people of goodwill, not just people of faith, but people of goodwill, can agree upon. Where thinking starts to scatter is when we say, right, what are we going to do about it? Okay, racism is evil. What are you going to do about a voice to Parliament? Racism is evil, so what should we have been doing about apartheid when it was strong in South Africa? on those at that point of asking, what are we going to do about it? You get different opinions. And that doesn't worry me too much. If you've got different opinions on what is the best way of dealing with the issue, fine. Let's discuss them. Let's let all those flowers bloom, provided we have a common mind on what it is we're trying to tackle, the evil of racism, or the evil of militarism, for that matter, or the evil of the tragedy that's going on in Ukraine and Russia. If we can focus on the major issues, it should then be possible to have a range of viewpoints among us on what should be done to deal with them. And I think we should not panic when there's no common mind on answering those practical questions.
Would anybody else like to ask David a question?
I think we all should have that uncurable optimism that David has.
Well, thank you, Siva, but I must confess that at some moments my incurable optimism does get just a little bit shaky, but that's life.
Yeah. Can I just ask, are you based in Sydney, David?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know not everyone's here from Sydney, but most from Australia. I'm just wondering what interfaith activity is there just out there at the moment for people who are interested in that kind of thing, and what do they do? Do they maybe I'm not thinking of theological discussions, but action or spiritual meetings? Are there any effective groups out there?
Well, some of the people on the screen at the moment can answer that question as well as or better than me. I'm looking at Siva, I'm looking at Vasa, I'm looking at John, and I probably should be looking at others too, who may well know more about it than I do. I'm only involved I'm retired, right? Well and truly retired. So I'm practically involved in Religions for Peace, which meets occasionally. When I was working, I was involved in many more ways, and some of the official dialogues that were going on. But more important than any of that is what's happening at grassroots level, I think, where people become friends, people have a barbecue and invite the neighbors of another faith to join in, where people get to know their colleagues at work and become friends and talk about what faith means to them and what are the big issues. I think it's happening right across the scene. John, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, sir. In Sri Lanka, there is a project going on where they choose the villagers and they bring the people together of different religious backgrounds and persuasions of ideologies, and then build a community of love and acceptance and harmony. And one of my colleagues, Kadirgama, you would have heard the name Kadirgama, from Sri Lankan background. He got the award for last year for the it is an international program, and one of my friends is a key person in US working from there, but it is I'm unable to get that name into my head. There is a program I can share it with you all, and that is choose the small areas and help people to live in harmony and support each other in, particularly when there is trouble, when there is sort of, for example, floods or whatever. And there, you break all the barriers, and then you are there, and on the basis of humanity or love. This is something that can happen anywhere in the world. But here it's the suburbs are not that the same as the Sri Lankan sort of communities structures, but it is possible in a neighborhood at least. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you. Thanks, John, and thank you very much, David. That's
Thank you.
very encouraging. And even though we we touched on the global issues, which as individuals and even as groups we're struggling with, and yet I think we found that there are things we can do on the interpersonal level, and maybe that's where it all starts, where culture changes, where good movements start.
Yes.
I might. Sorry, Jung. I don't think we'll have time now because it's after 9. But I'll just hand back to Siva for a final word.
Don't be long. I'm just talking about COVID is still lingering, and we need funding for vaccination because a lot of people get into COVID and they have to live long life with the COVID problem. So therefore, funding is very important. So everywhere we have to do the raise, funding raise to get the money to pay for the COVID first before we move on with life and spirituality development.
Thank you.
Yes, I think the message David gave is to use the power of love to transform ourselves and to transform the society that we are living. If individuals are transformed, the problems that we were discussing in the global level will gradually be stopped or whatever it is. So we had to focus on what David has said. I mean, this is the animal or the animal nature of human is to have this power and things in their hand, ego and greed and all sort of things. But to elucidate, to demonstrate the spiritual nature of human, if we can help transform ourselves and in people in our sphere of influence, then that is a sure solution to gradually bring peace in the world. So thank you very much, David, and it was very, very valuable talk. And thank you all the friends for having a lively discussion.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.